Tonight has Halacha. Good evening, everybody. Tonight's Halacha and Tanya. So last time we were discussing washing for bread. You know, the proper way of doing it. If you're a right-handed person, pick up the cup in your right hand, give it over to the left hand, and then pour. Our custom is 3 times per hand. Some people do twice per hand. Our custom is to do it 3 times per hand. And then you do it with the other and the left hand. If you're a left-handed person, you pick it up in your left hand, give it to the right hand, and then wash the left hand first. That's the way the Samachtzedek holds. The left-handed people wash the left hand first. Now, what happens if somebody has to go to they're going to go wash to eat? This is a common thing that could happen. People are going to go to the bathroom before eating. You know, they're about to wash for the Shabbos meal or weekday meal, whatever, and they want to use the facilities first. So the best way of doing it halachically is you come out of the bathroom, you wash your hands. In fact, it would be better not to use a vessel, even if you always do. And to wash your hands, dry them well, and make the bracha sheyatzar for using the facility. And then you wash properly for bread. Okay, that's the proper way of doing it. But technically, if somebody went out of the bathroom and they wanted to wash straight forward, they forgot. And they, instead of washing their hands to make ashayatzar, so what they did was they just washed for bread. They didn't wash their hands after the bathroom. They just filled up the cup and they washed for bread. So then the halacha is, that's okay. You make al netilas yadayim, and then you say asher yotzar before you make hamaitzi. That's what the Alter Rebbe says to do. You first, even if, let's see, instead of what the proper thing is to wash your hands and dry them, and then go wash for bread properly. But if not, and if you forgot and you washed, so then the din is you can wash, if you washed for bread, then you're allowed to make al netilas yadayim. You say asher yotzar, and then you go to the table and you make hamaitzi. Another thing that happens pretty often, by the way, just to show you, it says a person needs to wash their hands from the power of a human, the power of a person. In other words, let's say somebody is in a situation where they don't have a cup. Now, normally you have a cup, and we'll discuss soon the dinim of what cups are good to wash, what cups are not good to wash with. So let's say you don't have any cups. You're not in the bathroom, you're in a place where you're able to wash for bread, but you don't have any cups. So the din is like this. If you have a faucet that when you open it, a big thrust of water comes out, enough to cover the hand, so then you could do like this. Open up, close it, open, close it, and then it's considered as if you poured 3 times because the water coming out is from the power of a person that opened the faucet, that turned on the faucet. If you don't have that, then you have a problem because let's say it's a faucet that just trickles out. So when you turn it on, so then it's not gonna be good. But if it's a faucet that have the strong flow, so to speak, that when you turn it on, immediately enough water comes out to cover your hand, you do that on and off 3 times, and that's fine. Now, Shulchan Aruch talks about, the Alter Rebbe also brings down this din. What happens if a monkey washes somebody? That's the, believe it or not, it's a din Shulchan Aruch. It's a Gemara, but the din Shulchan Aruch. A kaif. A kaif is a monkey. So now the question is, can a monkey, if a monkey washes, a person has a pet monkey that's trained, and the monkey washes the person's hand, is that called good or not? So it's an argument that Halacha, the Alter Rebbe says, if you have no other choice, b'diavad it's good. Because it's washing for bread is rabbinic, and if washing for bread is rabbinic, so then, because there's an opinion that says you're allowed to, so b'diavad, if you had no other person, the only one able to wash you was a monkey, then you could do it. Now, there's another issue today with bathrooms. Sometimes you go into a public bathroom and there's no sink outside. So am I allowed to wash in the bathroom and then make the bracha outside? Obviously, you cannot make a bracha out in the bathroom. That you're not allowed to do. But the question is, if I have no choice, am I able to wash with a cup in the bathroom sink and then go out and make the bracha? So the difference is really a very practical difference. If the bathroom is clean, then you're allowed to do it. If you have no choice, it's not the best way of doing it to wash in the bathroom. But sometimes people are traveling in airports or whatever, and there's no other faucet except the bathroom, and they get a cup. If they have no choice, they're allowed to wash in a bathroom, providing the bathroom is clean. But if it's a bathroom, and sometimes, especially in the airport bathrooms and those places, they actually have a separate partition between the toilets and the washing area, which makes it halachically much better. Halachically, it's much better because then it's not halachically actually the bathroom. There's a wall separating it. But let's say there is no wall separating it. So the din is like this, and you'll pardon my explaining it because I have no other way of doing it. If the toilet seats have urine on it, then you're not that bathroom, you're not allowed to wash it. If the toilet seats are clean and the bathroom generally is clean, then if you have no choice, halachically, you're allowed to wash for bread in the bathroom. Obviously, you have to make the bracha outside of the bathroom. Now, let me speak a little bit about the bracha on when you make the bracha for washing for bread. Normally, the halacha is that you make a bracha before you do the mitzvah. The Gemara learns it out from a pasuk that you have to make a bracha evel asiyason. The Gemara says you have to make a bracha before you do the mitzvah. It's very logical also because once you did the mitzvah already, you're not commanded. If I did the mitzvah already, if I already benched lulav and esrog, how can I make a bracha that God commanded me to do a mitzvah? I'm not commanded anymore. I did it. So normally, the din is you have to make a bracha before you do the mitzvah. There's a few exceptions to that. One is mikveh for a woman. Like we know, a woman immerses once, whatever her custom is, and then makes the bracha and tables again. A convert who is converting in the mikveh, so obviously they can't make a bracha until they immerse, because before they immerse, they're not Jewish yet. When they immerse, they become Jewish. So then they have no choice. They have to make the bracha after the immersion, or in the middle of the immersion. But so what's the sort of Netilas Yadayim? So it says that because the hands are anyway not pure, and you're going to wash them, so the din is as follows by Netilas Yadayim, and people should know this because this is, if you want to wash properly, you have to know this aspect of the halacha. It's very important. There's three parts of the mitzvah of washing for bread. One is the actual washing, that's called netilah. Another aspect of it is rubbing the hands together after you finish washing. And then the din is drying. That's three parts of the mitzvah of washing for bread. Now, therefore, the halacha says like this. You pour water 3 times on the right hand, 3 times on the left. With a little bit of water that's left in the palm of your left hand, you save a little bit of water in the palm and you start rubbing your hands together while you're making the bracha. So you make the bracha before you finish rubbing your hands together, which is actually part of the mitzvah. And then you dry your hands. So that's the proper way of doing it, because then you're doing the bracha also before the mitzvah, because you're really not finished the mitzvah yet until you rub your hands together, and for that matter, even drying the hands. Now, when a person washes for bread, the Gemara says a very sharp expression. If somebody doesn't dry their hands, if somebody washes for bread and doesn't dry their hands properly, it's considered, the Gemara calls it, as if you ate impure bread. Kilo achal lechem tamei. It's like you ate impure bread. Therefore, a person must make sure that when they wash for bread, their hands have to be completely dry. another din that Shulchan Aruch brings down in reference to this washing, and that is you're not supposed to dry your hands on your clothing that you're wearing. And in fact, the Gemara says it's kosher l'shikcha. The Gemara says this. If you dry this, not only by washing for bread, generally speaking, when you wash your hands and you dry it on your clothing that you're wearing, that's called kosher l'shikcha. It makes you forget your learning. That doesn't apply to an apron, because an apron is made to dry your hands. It's like you're like wearing a towel of some sort. We're talking about to dry it on your sleeves, on your shirt, on your blouse, or whatever. So the Gemara says it's kosher l'shikcha. And this Alter Rebbe brings it down, Shulchan Aruch brings it down in reference to actually drying your hands after washing for bread. So you have to make sure that you don't dry it on your hand. You have to make sure that you dry your hands properly. And now there's another din that's very, very practical, especially when you're washing with a whole bunch of people or even with yourself. If I washed my right hand, we're talking about now right-handed people, the same thing of the lefty with the left hand. If I wash my right hand and by mistake, I touched with my left hand before I washed the left hand, I touched the right hand, it's no good. I have to dry my right hand and wash again. In other words, if I touch my wet hands with hands that were not washed, it's no good. I need to dry my hands and wash again. And this could be in a few ways. Number one, I wash my right hand and by mistake, my left hand that was unwashed touched the right hand. Then the din is I have to dry my hand and wash again. Or what happens, this can happen in a shul, in a public place where a lot of people are washing. I finish washing my hands and I'm handing the cup to somebody else, and by mistake, they didn't wash yet, they touched my hand. So the din is, I have to dry my hands and wash all over again, without a bracha. Without a bracha. Even if I made the bracha, I have to wash again without a bracha. Obviously, if I didn't make a bracha, I wash again and I make a bracha. But you have to be very careful. This is very common, by the way. By mistake, your left hand touches your right hand, or reverse, or somebody else who didn't wash yet wanted to take the cup from your hand or whatever, and they touch your hand, and they didn't wash yet. The halacha is you need to dry your hand and wash again. We're coming about talking. Somebody asked the question: if you talk, do you also have to be washed again without a bracha? Now, let me answer that question because it was asked now online here. The din is like this. That's what I'm talking about. If I talk things not pertaining to the washing or to the bread, then I have to wash again without a bracha. But if, let's say, I wash for bread and I realize there's no salt on the table, and I say to somebody by mistake, I shouldn't say, but I said, bring salt or bring a knife, then I don't have to wash again, because I talk things pertaining to the washing and to the bread. But if I talked about the weather and the sports or what's going on in the news, so yeah, then you have to wash again but without a bracha. Okay, next is like this. Now, let's say I want to wash from this cup. Okay, in order for a cup to be kosher to wash with, it has to be not broken. It has to be complete. The top has to be smooth. And the water has to be able to come out at one time with a lot to wash on the hand. For instance, you can't wash with a soda bottle. You can't wash with the soda bottle because the top of the soda bottle is very narrow. And if it's narrow, the water is not going to come out enough at one time. It's going to come out very slowly. But there's no choice. There are opinions that say it's okay. But l'chatchila, you're not allowed to do it. You have to make sure actually that you don't use a soda bottle. But the top also has to be smooth of the vessel. Now, what happens if you have a pitcher? Now, a pitcher is a whole keli, except the spout is a little bit lower than the rest of the top of it. It's a little bit lower, and it's also, bent in a little bit. So the din is like this. A pitcher is a good utensil. It's a full utensil. It's not broken. You can wash from a pitcher, but you cannot wash. The water cannot come from the part over the spout. You can't wash from a pitcher if you're holding the pitcher with the handle and the water is going over the spout, because it's not coming out evenly. You can hold in the dip, whatever. You can wash on the other side of the pitcher, on the other three sides or whatever. But you shouldn't wash with the water going over the water going over the spout area. Somebody asked the question, by the way, what happens if you washed for bread, you dried your hands, and then somebody touches you? Then you do not need to wash again because your hands were already dried. If your hands are still wet and somebody who didn't wash yet touches you, so then you have to wash again. Some people are careful that when they wash for bread, they don't want anybody to shake their hand during the meal. I was interested. I saw that many times by the Rebbe. When the Rebbe used to wash for Fabrengens, basically at the end of Yom Tov, the weekday Fabrengens, the Rebbe rarely washed. But when the Rebbe would wash, Mitzvah, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Simchas Torah, when the Rebbe washed, and then they would have Keshel Bracha. So you noticed a few times when people came over, even prominent rabbis came over to between talks. Sometimes they would come and tell the Rebbe something, whatever, and they would stick out their hand to shake the Rebbe's hand. You saw clearly that the Rebbe said to them, "I'm sorry, I washed. I don't want to. I don't want." They understood. I don't want to. The Rebbe didn't want to touch the hand. But halachically, it seems that if the hands are dry and somebody touches it, it's not an issue. Halachically. So let's say you're in the middle of eating, you washed, and a stranger comes into the house, or a person comes into the house, you give him Shalom Aleichem, it's not an issue halachically, because your hands are dry. What? You can wash from a square quart, a square cup. You can wash, but not, preferably shouldn't wash over the corners. Better to wash, where it's the square part of it. Because then it comes off better. Okay. Now, what happens if somebody is near a kosher mikvah, by the ocean, by not a man-made lake, by a non-man-made lake, a natural lake which God made, which basically, let's say, technically a kosher mikvah, and you don't have any cups. Halachically, you can dip your hand into the lake or not a pool, because the pool's not a kosher mikvah. Saying a place which is a kosher mikvah, you're by the ocean, and you didn't bring a cup and you want to wash for bed. So halachically, you stick your hand in the ocean once, and the other hand in the ocean once. That's a good washing for bread. Now the question is, what bracha do you make? There's three opinions. One opinion says, al netilas yadayim, like regular. Another opinion says, al tvilas yadayim, because you didn't wash your hand with a keli. It says in the Mefarshim, the commentaries say, one of the reasons, why do we say the bracha netila instead of al rechitza? If you want to say washing, the word is rechitzas yadayim. Why do we say the word netilas yadayim? So it says, and Mefarshim explains, Dr. Rabbi brings it down too, that netila means a vessel. So because we're washing with the vessel, you could say, when you wash for bread, you say al netilas yadayim. Okay, because you're washing with a keli. So what's the din if you toggle your hand into the ocean? So one opinion says, listen, the bracha is al netilas yadayim, you make al netilas yadayim, that's it. Another opinion says, you say al tvilas yadayim. You're toggling it, you're immersing it. Another opinion says al shtifas yadayim. Shtif is also getting it wet. The Pearl Alter Rebbe says in Siddur that bottom line, what bracha should you make? Preferably, asher kishanu b'mitzvayis v'tzvanu al shtifas yadayim. But if you said al netilas yadayim or al tfilas yadayim, it's okay. You don't have to make a new bracha. But the Alter Rebbe paskins and Siddur that what you really should do is make the bracha al shtifas yadayim. Shtifa is like washing, not shutaf b'mayim. Shutaf b'mayim means like soaking in the water. So that's now. There's another interesting. It's brought down in halacha, but a lot of different customs. If you notice, people when they wash, they pick up their hands. Now, the reason why halachically people pick up their hands is because, in fact, if you never noticed, by mayim achareinim that people wash before benching, they wash with their hands facing down, because that's to wash off that what's called melech zdemis, that dangerous salt that was very powerful. So you want to get it off your fingers. By netilas yadayim for bread, it says you really should pick up your hands a little bit. Not some people do it big times, and they even say su yadechem kodesh, but we don't do that because you don't want water that came on top of the wrist to come below the wrist in the water the place where you washed already. So you don't want water that maybe you touched on top and that wasn't washed properly. So you don't want the water. But now there's an interesting difference. Netilas yadayim in the morning. We should have discussed this by Negovas. Maybe we did. I don't remember. When you wash again, Negovas in the morning by the sink, you wash your hands. Chabad custom is like this. Listen, this is for Negovas in the morning when you rewash by the sink. You dry your hands, you wash your hands, alternately. You dry your hands, you don't make the bracha yet. And then you pick up your hands to your temples with your hands separated. And you make the bracha then, by washing for bread, you keep your hand together and we pick it up to the heart level where the heart is. And then we do on the netilas yadayim with our hands together. So there's two differences between negel vaser in the morning and washing for bread. Besides, this is 1-1-1 and this is 1-2-3, 1-2-3. And that is number one, by netilas yadayim in the morning, after when you're dressed already and you go to the sink to wash negel vaser, you make the bracha on netilas yadayim after their hands are dried, with their hands separated, picked up to the temple, temple area of the face. On netilas yadayim for bread, the Rabbi writes in Sefer Minhagim, you rub your hands together and then you keep it up like heart level and you make the bracha on netilas yadayim and then you dry your hands. So that's the difference between negel vaser in the morning and washing for bread. Another thing about what else is there in this din? Okay. Another very important thing. Washing for bread, your hands have to be clean. Okay? You cannot have what's called a chatzitza, a separation between the water and your hand. Which means if you have rings, then the water is not getting underneath the ring. If you have dirt, the water is not getting underneath the dirt. And in fact, it's so strict, by the way, it's not as strict as mikvah, but halachically it's as strict as mikvah. Whatever is considered a separation, but for mikvah, it's considered a separation for netilas yadayim, which means like this. If a person has longer nails, before they wash, they need to check and make sure there's no dirt under the nails, because the nails also have to be washed as part of the hand. So you have to make sure that there's no dirt under the nails. Secondly, you have to make sure your hands are clean. You don't have dirt, you don't have spots, whatever, or rings, or things like that. Because, again, it can't have any separation between the water and your hand. Now, if it's somebody, like Halacha says, a teacher that always has ink on their hands, or a sheikhet that deals a lot with blood, so they always have blood on their hands because they don't care about it because they always have it. So then halachically, it's not considered a chatzitza. It's not considered a separation, even though chatchila is better to take it off, obviously. But a person needs to know that before they wash for bread, they need to check their hands and make sure that their hands are clean. Under the nail is clean. There's no dirt. There's no dirt on the hand, because then there's something separating the water and the person's body, and it's not a valid washing. So people have to be very careful with that also. Now, if it's, and here let me just continue with this. There's another difference also if it's a discoloration or it's actual substantial dirt or dye. Okay. Or I just got a call about this today about a mikvah. Now they have these, it's coming summer. They have these suntan sprays. Okay. And for mikvah, it's a very big problem because it's substantial that when you wash. In fact, I had a story. A lady went to the mikveh tonight. It was not in LA. A lady went to the mikveh and she wiped herself with the towel and she still had some residue of the suntan spray, whatever. And she had to go back again because there was something substantial. She was still in the mikveh. It wasn't so bad, but she had to go back. So you have to be careful. There shouldn't be any substantial. Now, if it's just a discoloration, that's a different story. Especially for washing for bread, which is rabbinic, we're not as fanatic as we are for mikveh, which is biblical with the punishment of karis and things like that. Nail polish for washing for bread, even if it's chipped a little bit or, it's not, the halacha is today, women are lenient in it because they do walk out. They don't care about it so much. For mikveh, it wouldn't be valid. They would have to, get it off. But the fact is today, because women walk around the streets like that, they won't go to a bar mitzvah or a wedding, but they still walk to the supermarket. They'll go to the store like that. So it's not really considered a chatzitza. It's not considered a separation. But ideally, a person should make sure that the hands are clean. Otherwise, it's a big issue. Okay, next, Tanya. Once again, I want to mention Mitzvah Shem Monday night, there is no class. So don't forget, next class is going to be Wednesday night. Are there any?
Rabbi? Yeah, I have a question. Someone posted it. If someone has a Band-Aid over stitches on their finger and they can't take the Band-Aid off, can they wash for bread?
Okay, that is something I would rather discuss next week because it's like a 5-10 minute discussion and I want to get to Tanya. Now, Rebbe happens to be considered strict about it, but there are other people that are lenient, and there's a lot of details in it, so we're going to leave it for next week. And I'll try to remember, and if not, somebody remind me.